This is a 6-inch joiner, and it's probably typical of the one that you've got in your shop. But before you use it, you have to make sure that your fence and tabletop are at 90 degrees. To check those, I like using a machinist square like this. I'll check it on the left side, and then check it on the right side to assure that I'm at 90 degrees. Check the owner's manual to make any adjustments if it's not 90 degrees. I like using a machinist square because I really like it. I know it's square. Make sure that the square you're using is square. Now here's how you can check to see if your square is square. Put it up against a straight edge. Put a pencil line on the outside edge of that tongue and flip the blade to the other side and see if that line lines up. As long as the reveal is the same all the way around, you have a square square. Now another thing on the jointer, the outboard table is fixed and it's at the same height as the cutter blades. The infeed table is parallel to the outfeed table but lower, and in this case about a 32nd of an inch. That's how much material we're going to take off every pass we make with that board. So it's important to keep the board edge flat on the table and up against the fence. Pressure is put on the infeed side until the board passes over the cutters, and then pressure is put on the outfeed side to continue the cut. This will assure a 90-degree edge and an edge with no snipes and no bowing on it. Here's how it works. Okay, again, down against the table, up against the fence. Slow, easy push to the opposite side. Now you notice a nice clean edge. There's no sniping at the front and back. This is a real nice straight edge with no bows in it at all. Now had you noticed individual saw marks in here, you're moving a little too fast. Slow your feed speed down some. If you notice some chipping on the edges, all you need to do is reverse the direction of that board. That'll make the grain run a little bit more correctly for the joint that you're planning on doing. This is a really nice, clean, jointed edge. This is what we're looking for. Now jointing a board on a jointer works, but it's not the only tool to use. A table saw also works very well. In fact, in some cases, a thicker, wider, longer board is better supported on a tabletop. So let me show you a few things you have to check on the table saw first, and then we'll go through the jointing on a table saw. So the first thing is, much like we did with a joiner, I just want to make sure that my table saw blade is at 90 degrees to the table. And again, back to my trusty machinist square. Once I'm sure of that, I'm all set to go. I want to now make sure that my blade is parallel to the fence. There's a few different ways to do that. One of the first ways is to use an adjustable square like this. By putting the square in the groove just to the right of the saw blade. Now the groove is parallel to the blade. So by putting the adjustable square in the groove and extending the blade, I can slide my fence up to that blade and lock it in there. And if I test it here and test it here and see that the offset is the same, my fence is parallel to the blade. It's a great way to do it. Now there is an alternate to doing it. If you don't have a square like this, if your table has extensions on them, like this one does, you can use the left side of the fence, slide that up to that extension, and when you sight down the edge of the fence onto that extension, it should be even all the way, since the extension is parallel to the groove, which in turn is parallel to the blade. If you have a smaller saw that doesn't have extensions, using the right side of the fence and lining that up with the end of the saw does the same thing. But no matter which method you use, there's one real good way to check and see whether or not the alignment is perfect. And here's how it's done with a piece of wood. I'm going to take this board and I'm going to cut an edge off of it. And when I send the board through the blade, you should only hear cutting at the front part of the blade as the back side of this wood passes the blade. If it's cutting all the way through, it means the saw is cutting at the front and the back of that blade. It's making a smaller saw work a lot harder. And secondly, it's leaving inordinate saw marks in the back side of this board, which makes joinery really tough. I've already adjusted this and I think it's in pretty good shape. And what I'm going to do now is send it through, and you should be able to hear cutting only at the front, and I'll kind of talk to you about when that happens. And when I finish that cut, there should be no cutting sound. Here's how it goes. Should be able to hear this cutting. And right when I get to here, you shouldn't hear any cutting anymore through the saw. Since the saw only cut at the front of the blade, it's leaving a very clean, smooth line. When you look at the edge of this, it's nice and straight. And also, if you look at the edge of this, there's no secondary saw marks. That's a really nicely jointed board. And again, as thick, as wide, and as long as you want table saw works real well. Joiner works, but a table saw is just fine also. So no matter what method you use to joint the boards, they should fit evenly along their entire length. And with just a little hand pressure, should be able to push those boards together and flash them up against the light. And if you don't see light shining through those boards, you've got a perfectly jointed set of boards.